Hello and welcome to Smaulgld's. In case you missed it, top gold and silver stories for the week ended April 1st, 2017. A Brics gold standard. Russia and China reportedly in talks to create a gold marketplace. Participation in the gold marketplace would facilitate trading among Brazil, India, China, Russia, and South Africa. Trump blames the Freedom Caucus for his healthcare legislative defeat, and Russia, Trump, and surveillance battle for media attention. So we're going to talk today about this Russia-China supposed agreement to create a gold marketplace. Now, this is not a spoof like yesterday's April Fool's prank that we played. We're going to talk a bit about that and the reaction to it later on in the podcast. A lot of you really enjoyed that. A few people were annoyed by it, but overall, I think it was well received. And we're going to talk about why I think that, I'm going to get your thoughts as well, why that prank actually worked, at least amongst those of you who follow the gold and silver markets. But let's talk about this Russia-China gold marketplace. This, again, is not a fake story. It's nothing made up, although it does come from the Russian news agency TASS, but there's no reason to doubt the veracity that they are working on certain de-dollarization initiatives, given that they need to have alternative financial structures in the case of sanctions, or just in the case to facilitate trade. You don't always necessarily have to trade using dollar or other currencies. You can trade in local currencies, and you can also trade in your gold, especially since China and Russia are two large gold producers. Russia sells gold to China. In some respects, you're eliminating an unneeded step just by trading the gold amongst China and Russia, and then you expand that marketplace. It doesn't seem like too radical of a thought to do so. Let's go to that first before we do the top stories of the week and then the top gold and silver stories. Let's talk about the three types of, generally, gold standards. A lot of people talk about a gold standard. They're in favor of a gold standard, but I think they mean a standard in which the currency itself is backed by a certain amount of gold. So the first gold standard a lot of people would know about or would remember, if you're old enough, would be the Bretton Woods Agreement, which really, to my mind, was not a gold standard, but a dollar standard. Under the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944, the Bretton Woods Agreements, the United States dollar was chosen as the world's reserve currency, and it would be redeemable in gold, meaning that any central bank that had been a signatory to the Bretton Woods Agreements could take their dollars that they had obtained. However, it didn't have to be through trade with the U.S. It could have been via trade with each other. And if a country was accumulating dollars because it had a trade surplus, not just with the U.S., or perhaps not even with the U.S., but with other countries, it would have those dollars and they would trade with confidence internationally because they can always be brought to the United States and get gold. Now, that broke down for a number of reasons. One of the reasons I think that's not talked about very much is that you could have dollars. For example, Germany could have a trade surplus. I don't know if this was the case, but could have a trade surplus with the rest of Europe, could have a trade deficit with the U.S., but could still bring their dollars to the U.S. and drain the gold from the United States. So, in a sense, when you have these currency standards that are backed by gold but redeemable as well, that's an invitation to have your gold kind of drawn out of your coffers. Now, if you maintain a trade balance under a different type of gold standard we're going to talk about in a second, then you don't have to worry about that. And generally, if under a gold payment standard, which is kind of what this gold marketplace is that they're talking about, you're only trading, you don't really care about redeeming a currency for a set amount of gold. You're basically saying, I have goods, you have gold, let's swap. And that's it. So there's no standard. The standard is no gold, no goods. So if Russia wants to sell oil and China wants to pay for it, they don't have to give them dollars. They can say, well, we've been mining, we've got a month's worth of mining supply here. We'll just transfer that gold to your account or physically deliver it to you, and you deliver us the oil. And that is a gold payments standard. Now, that to me is a very simple standard. It doesn't rely on the confidence of the issuer. It doesn't rely on people wondering whether the issuer that has the currency redeemable in gold has the gold, as was the case with the U.S. and the Bretton Woods agreement. And the reason Nixon closed the gold window was the United States was starting to run. They really had not yet run massive deficits, not like they have today, but they were starting to be in deficit, and countries were bringing their dollars, France and Germany in particular, and Switzerland, to the United States and getting them redeemed for the gold that the U.S. had. And remember, gold was set at a price at $35, so they knew that the free market price of gold was probably higher, so it was a good deal. You accumulated dollars however you had them, and you brought them back to good old Uncle Sam, and he gave you the gold. Well, I've shown you guys charts before in the past how the U.S. gold was basically cut in half during the last 10 years of the Bretton Woods Agreement, and that's one of the main reasons that Nixon closed the gold window. Now, there is another type of gold standard where currencies have a fixed exchange rate to gold, where a dollar's worth, say, I don't know, 1/20th of an ounce. Or they have each currency had its own value fixed rate towards gold, and that's called a classical gold standard. And they had that from 1880 to 1914, and it worked. But you see, things like that only work until someone has a problem or some country has a problem and they need more flexibility. Because once you're locked into your exchange rate, you don't really have, like they have today, where you can have highly accommodative monetary policy, where the central bankers can really, can print money, they can buy assets. Under a classical gold standard, your currency was tied to the price of the amount of the dollar that the gold was worth, and that was it. And you were stuck with that, but that gave you financial discipline. So when we talk about a gold standard, and then there's another type where it's not really a gold standard, where by law a country may have to keep a certain amount of its reserves in gold, supposedly backing their currency, but it's not necessarily redeemable. So, for example, I think Switzerland had it in the early 2000s. I think they had 40% of the reserves in gold, but no one can go and get the gold. It was just that supposedly it gave confidence that the Swiss franc was backed by gold. So when people talk about China backing the yuan with gold, I don't think they mean, I don't think they'd ever want to back it the way the United States backed it under Bretton Woods, because that would just mean that people would turn their yuan in for gold, and then whatever advantage China might have had in holding a lot of gold would soon be gone for people trying to get the gold from China. And remember, in order for that type of standard to work, they have to set the price. So you think you have manipulation now? Well, under a gold standard, you have to manipulate the price. Things have to be set and fixed at a certain price so that there's some type of stability. You can't have big changes, big swings in the free market price of gold. So the international monetary system has to agree on certain either fractions or just a set price of gold. So I don't know where that's going to lead. I don't think it means as much as people might want to read into it. It makes sense for two gold producing nations to have the ability to exchange their commodities, one commodity for the other, in a simple barter exchange. Now, Alan Greenspan makes a very good point as to why there's no reason why any country wouldn't accept gold. I think the statement he made back in 2004 was, gold is a currency. It is still, by all evidences, the premier currency where no fiat currency, including the dollar, can match. And that is a true statement. Now, he is the maestro, the king of the dollar when he was the Federal Reserve chairman, but he knows that, and he gave examples in that speech that he gave to the Council on Foreign Relations in 2014 about how people will always accept gold. You may not always accept the dollar, but gold has been universally accepted. And the reason for that, it has no counterparty risk. It's not dependent upon the promises, the monetary policy, the balance sheet. Gold is basically a asset, and it's immutable, and you give it to someone and it doesn't have to perform, it just is. All right, so we'll see where that heads. In the other stories, Trump attacked the Freedom Caucus for not supporting the health care bill. I think there's good reason why they didn't support it. It appeared to be Obamacare 2.0. I'm not quite sure of the strategic benefit of attacking the Freedom Caucus. He was basically saying, he put out a tweet, almost that there are enemies for not supporting us and that he might have to turn to the Democrats. And I say good luck with that, because I don't think that the Democrats are natural allies. I don't think that they would probably try to extract a lot out of Trump to be on his side. But it does highlight that what I had mentioned a while back during the campaign about Trump. Trump is not an ideologue. And Trump basically likes to do deals. And the Freedom Caucus messed up his deal. Now, they messed it up on ideological and principled basis. But to Trump, the principle is getting a deal done, and they're the ones who, in his mind, didn't let the deal get done. So that's something to look forward to as you analyze, or we analyze, Donald Trump's behavior. Is he will always be more interested in getting a deal done, not necessarily keeping campaign promises, not necessarily following a political ideology, but actually getting deals done. And he will deal with anybody. He says he'll deal with the Democrats, whether they want to deal with him or not. The other thing that happened during the week was this video had emerged from a couple of weeks ago. Evelyn Farkas, I think she was Deputy Secretary of Defense. It was not a big position in the Obama administration. She had left at the end of 2015. But she was on one of these shows. It wasn't the morning show. It was MSNBC with Mika Brzezinski. And she was talking about how she was concerned that the intelligence that they had been gathering on Trump was going to get lost, and there was this big push to get the information to the Hill and so on. And it kind of runs interference with the concept that Trump saying he was under surveillance, or actually he said literally he was being wiretapped, and the FBI director Comey said he wasn't wiretapped. That doesn't mean he wasn't under surveillance. But these two stories are now really going to come to a head, because if indeed there is a speculation that Donald Trump was working with the Russians during the campaign, well, the only way they could have that speculation come to any type of proof is they would have had to have done surveillance. So they can't have it both ways and say it's ridiculous to say that Donald Trump was under surveillance, but yet we know, or we have reason to believe that he was, because you would have no reason to believe Donald Trump or his staff were involved in anything unless you had them under surveillance. So at some point that story has to break into two, and it either has to be, yes, we did surveillance and we caught him, or he was under surveillance and we didn't catch him, in which case then there's a problem, because why was he under surveillance? If you didn't find anything, and why would you suspect him of having done anything? So we'll see how that break wears out. And the reason I mention that is, if you do get the latter result, there will be turmoil. And I think one of the reasons they're trying to spend a lot of time on the Russian angle right now is because they may be trying to cover the fact that there was some type of surveillance, and that's why they actually laugh at it and act as if it couldn't possibly be true, and that Donald Trump is just making up stories. Because if it's actually true, it's no laughing matter. So then they have to talk about why Russia hacking our election is a big deal. And that Russia has been trying to infiltrate, and not just Russia, but a lot of countries, the U.S. process. And the U.S. does the same in other countries. It's not as if this is uncommon, but somehow they're making it out to be it's more nefarious this year because they had some type of willing partner in Donald Trump. All right, so we're going to go through the week in gold, and towards the end we're going to talk about that April Fool's prank. Okay, so gold closed the week at $12.49. up 0.5%. It was up a few bucks. Silver actually did better. This is the first week that silver decoupled itself from gold and rose a lot more than gold did. It was up 2.8% at 1823, getting closer to where it was before that slapped down a couple of weeks ago. And finally, the gold silver ratio is now down below 70. Trade of the week, I picked my own. As predicted, Trump not driven by ideology or principle, but deals. And so he thinks the Freedom Caucus messed up his deal, and now they are enemies. And that's the point, that Trump will view anyone who messes up his deal, probably even his own family, which he wouldn't tolerate, but as his enemy. And he likes deals and not necessarily, and he likes outcomes, but not necessarily those based on ideology or principle. Other stories in gold, there was a $1 million gold coin stolen from the Berlin Museum. It's a big, massive 100-kilogram coin. You click on the links, you can see pictures of that coin. Some guy, another good story, picked up 4 gold nuggets on the beach, supposedly in the Gold Coast of Australia. Now, sometimes, and he wouldn't say where, sometimes these people, they find gold somewhere else and then they try to claim they found it on the beach. And that's just basically to keep people away from perhaps where he found it. They wouldn't want other people going to that place and finding his supposed stash. Now, gold and silver sales, we're going to talk about those later in the week. The U.S. Mint, the Perth Mint, American Silver Eagles, American Gold Eagles, American Gold Buffalo, all very, very poor sales in the month of March after a very poor month of February. I'll have all the details for you later in the week, but they are not good. But that really has nothing to do with the price of gold or the price of tea in China. It's just some indicator of retail demand in the United States, and we'll talk about why that is in those podcasts later in the week. If you're interested in buying gold or silver, you can do so through the Smaulgld site or the links below. Smaulgld gets a small commission. You pay no more, no less than if you visited the sites directly, so please check it out. It's not investment advice to buy gold or silver, but if you made the decision to do so, you can help out Smaulgld by clicking on the links and buying your gold and silver, comparing pricing and shipping, and buying your gold and silver from the dealers that we have featured on the site. The U.S. economic data again continues. The consumer confidence is high. Home prices are still heading higher. Trade deficit went down. So the economy looks like, all things considered, it's a little better than worse. It just depends on where you are in that economy. Although there is rising inflation, and doesn't look like the GDP for the first quarter is going to be very good. The Atlanta Fed lowered their first quarter estimate to 0.9. Now that hasn't stopped the Fed from yakking up a storm about more rate hikes, and on the basis that the economy is strengthening. So a lot of this doesn't make sense, but that's the Fed. Here's the link for the story on Russia-China lay groundwork for Brics transactions in gold. Also, there was a large gold mine found, supposedly in China, which would make it, I think if they were to get that one running, it would probably produce maybe 60-70% of what they're already producing. So it would really put China as the premier gold producer in the world. I think right now they're about 450, 460 tons a year. They could get up to about 600-700 tons a year if they get this one fully operational. House committee passes bill to audit the Fed. We'll see where that goes. Fed chatter. Fisher talks about 2 more rate hikes. Seems to be about right. So the Fed is out there talking about rate hikes, that's for sure. And they'll probably pull off another one and see how it goes, where the stock... They've now basically admit that the stock market is a consideration. And of course it is, because a highly valued stock market that can stay highly valued or overvalued means that the U.S. is living beyond its means. Because if its stock prices, people are willing to pay more for them, it means it's got a premium on its assets. And those assets supposedly then are owned by Americans. It's trickled down to them, which means Americans are wealthier in a sense, in an unjust way, because they have their assets marked 30 times earnings instead of 10 times earnings, which means their assets are worth a lot more than they should be. So of course the Fed has an interest, and of course people who have assets are the wealthier people, and the banks like to make sure that the wealthier people are taken care of. Mortgage applications were down. This I would call in economic terms noise. You really can't go by the mortgage applications any given week or month on what's going to happen. Um, what else do we got? Yeah, there were some stories on this one. This one you have to check out. There was a story, and it was in Forbes, and it was one of these investment advisors saying, "Should you purchase gold for your portfolio?" Now you can stop reading right off the bat. This is a quote. "Keep in mind, gold doesn't have any intrinsic value and doesn't pay dividends." Okay, I get the dividend thing. I've heard that 1,000 times. It also doesn't default. So, but put that aside. To say that gold doesn't have any intrinsic value, that's all gold is a lump of intrinsic value. Any event, you want to check it out. It's in here. You can click on it. You can read it. You can laugh. You can cry. Another story on silver. They make these stretchy silver screens where you can they're saying now you're going to get the computer screens you can like fold up and stick in your pocket, made out of silver. More Fed chatter. Dudley asked about MBS holdings. We don't, those mortgage-backed securities that they have, that they never should have bought, that they overpaid for. They paid like $2 trillion to take them off the balance sheets of the banks, the too big to fail banks. They're not worth very much. He says we don't contemplate actively selling assets. Well, who would buy that stuff? I mean, by now, who knows if they're even performing anymore? They weren't performing back then. Maybe they are now. They don't tell you much about those. Like Porky Pig there. They don't tell you much about those assets and what they're worth. They just carry them on the balance sheet at what they paid for them, which was far too much in the first place. So I don't think they'll ever get back what they paid for them. Let's see, anything else? Oh, this is a little concerning in New Zealand. New rules forcing banks to alert police to transactions. And this is basically any international transaction. I would think if you live in New Zealand, you probably have more reason to have transactions with other countries than you would, let's say, in the United States. But banks would have to report a transaction, not even suspicious, just over a certain amount. And the amounts weren't that much to the police. You go into the bank, you send, I don't know what you would do, but $1,000 for some reason. I don't know, maybe you bought something, and then they call the police on you. It's very strange. Anyway, you can read that article, but that's just all part and parcel of the war on cash and control. And let's see. Festival gold drives Indian demand, higher prices curb buying elsewhere. Silver again in the news for using silver to kill bacteria. There's old stories about people used to put the silver dollar in the milk and used to make the milk not go bad for a longer period of time. More economic data again. Consumer sentiment is very high now. It's interesting, I guess, because it ties into the stock market and what's still in the newspapers, the media on the economy. They're still promoting that the economy is strong, robust, solid, and so on. Even though the Fed is showing that the GDP is tracking sub 1%. We'll see what happens. Okay, let's talk about this game over bombshell. Much watched Chinese Saudi docks prove gold, silver about to skyrocket. Now, I put out this yesterday on April 1st, intended as an April Fool's joke, which it was. And the reason I think it worked so well was it was plausible. I opened up and I talked about a letter I'd received from China that talked about what China was doing with respect to gold. They were accumulating gold in mines, and then they were going to bust up the COMEX and scatter it into a million pieces. They were going to stand for delivery. All stuff you've heard, and stuff that I kind of think is a bit spectacular, meaning that there's a lot of hyperbole in the precious metals coverage, to my mind, and I think a lot of you see it. You hear game over. You hear December 15, 2015, it's game over. dollar's going to collapse. 2014, gold's going to hit 50,000. No, you hear all these stories. Now, there's truth behind them and why people might believe them. But again, we've heard these stories for years that everything is imminent. There's a collapse coming, whether it's a dollar, whatever it is. Something's going to collapse. Something just broke. Something happened that never happened. Gold is going to skyrocket. We're running out of silver, whatever it is. And you've all heard these stories. And I guess the only reason a lot of people found it funny is because they were listening, thinking, yeah, that's right, that's right, that's right. And then, as I go through this April Fool's joke, I'll let you listen to this part here. Whew. Okay, so what does all this mean? Well, it means game over. This is bigger than any cunning linguistic data set or webbot hit, bigger than Shemitah. Derivatives will blow up across the globe. The euro will collapse for certain, as well as other fiat currencies, and including and eventually the dollar. And now if Marine Le Pen wins before the collapse, expect her to create a mad franc and a gold-backed franc to try and save her nation. This also guarantees that we will absolutely run out of silver and gold in 2017, putting all of these bullion dealers out of business, and gold and silver will go no offer. You won't be able to find gold or silver to buy. What happens to the gold-silver ratio? Well, that returns to 10 to 1. And at 125,000 gold, 1,250,000 an ounce silver an ounce initially. But then as silver is rarer than gold, expect parity to be reached as silver plays catch up. Then supply chains are going to break down as China, Saudi Arabia, the Brics nations, and others will accept only gold or silver bullion as payment for their goods. Then according to Silhouette data, the revaluation of gold by China will certainly lead to Weimar-style hyperinflation here in the U.S. and in the West. And emergency food like Mountain House will be too precious to even eat, as it will trade for hundreds or even thousands of ounces of gold or silver per can. Now on the brighter side, a silver dime should be able to allow the holder to buy a comfortable family home. A roll of silver eagles could buy you a city block, and an ounce or two of gold might buy a mid-sized bug-out island with air facilities, and Belgium could probably be had for a 2.2 kilo gold bar. As this new paradigm is ushered in on the road to Roomba, what should you do? Okay, that's enough. Okay, so we have heard these stories about the great wealth transfer. If you had, I don't know, a small amount of gold or silver, you could own the world. And people want to believe that. I want to believe that. I'd love to turn a silver dime in and buy a house. I'd like to buy the Netherlands for a small box of silver. But, it's probably not going to happen. And I think those in the precious metals community do a great disservice touting these lines over and over again, to the point where there are people who got annoyed at this video because they believe it so ardently. They want to keep hope alive. Yeah, you'll see, it's not sustainable. Collapse, collapse, collapse. Well, it may be. And that's probably not something you wish for anyway. It's not like if the society collapses and you have a couple of rolls of silver eagles that you're going to be doing better off than anyone else, and you're going to go and buy a few city blocks. But in any event, I thought it was funny. I took it down not because there's nothing in it to take down. I took it down because it's only a joke when people know that it's April Fool's. I don't want it up and have people think. Because there were some people who actually didn't get it and actually thought, oh, we've heard that before. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not saying it's going to happen. It's a joke. I don't want it up so people think that it's not an April Fool's joke. So you just have to wait till next April Fool's and I'll have something else up. In any event, I want to know what you think. I know the people that follow this channel liked it. It got 91 likes, got 27 dislikes. Nearly all the comments were favorable. People were pissed off in a funny way that they felt like they had been kind of had. But there were some people who thought that it was kind of disrespectful to those who I don't know, make these types of claims all the time about collapse and skyrocketing this and 50,000 that, and I just think at some point it does become a parody, and you don't even need to do an April Fool's joke to to put it up, because yes, the stuff, the analysis that these guys throw up there is correct. There are definitely things amiss in the financial system, but they don't all necessarily mean and all point in one direction that no matter whatever happens, gold and silver go higher. And that's what it seems like when people want to hear. Oh, okay, well, give me another piece of news, and that's going to prove that gold and silver are going higher. And maybe they will, maybe they won't. And if you say, well, they would have gone higher but for manipulation, well, tell us something we don't know. If you know there's manipulation, and you document it, and you read data, and you watch it happen, why would you think that somehow you're just going to ignore that manipulation and then gold and silver are just going to go higher? Well, then the other thing is, well, they're losing control of it. Why? Oh, they can't cover their shorts. They always cover their shorts. Eh, Look, I would like nothing better than anyone else if we had honest markets. But why would you think there's going to be honest markets? And why would you insist when everything we've seen hasn't been an honest market? In any event, thanks for listening, and we will talk to you during the week, and we'll get those numbers on the American Silver Eagles, Gold Eagles, Perth Mint numbers, and whatever else comes along. Thanks for listening.